I'm an optimist on the U.S. economy and on productivity and on future growth. So even if we have a recession and if the first half, say, of 2023 isn't great, I think the economy gets back on its feet in 2024 and, we're inventing new things. And I think digital technology is going to play a key role.
Welcome to This is Digital, a podcast brought to you by West Monroe. Join us as we talk to leading experts about bringing the digital mindset to your organization.
Welcome to This is Digital, a podcast about leading with digital to win in the marketplace. I'm your host, Rissa Redden, partner and chief marketing officer here at West Monroe. West Monroe is a digital services firm. We are thinkers and makers who bring hands-on experience and technical know-how to get things done and to deliver lasting value. On This is Digital, we talk to experts about how to go about not just doing digital, but being digital. We'll be sharing stories of digital successes and digital failures. This podcast is for business leaders like you who don't want to miss out on the opportunities digital holds. To kick off our episode, we have a news story about being digital that hits home ahead of the midterm elections. The piece, titled "Study Uncovers 10 New Voter Segments to Hone Political Ad Targeting," was featured recently in Adweek. As is the case during election season, especially as Election Day gets closer, campaign advertising is in full swing. But, as the article highlights, many political marketers are missing an opportunity to connect and engage with more nuanced audience segments. How does being digital come into play here? Consumer intelligence firm Resonate surveyed over 200,000 voters to get their opinions on a variety of political and policy issues. They found that if companies reviewed their online campaign data, ads could become much more targeted to their audiences and help increase voter turnout. Resonate found, however, that many voters aren't being engaged by the election news cycle. Traditionally, advertisers decide on ad spend based on voters driven by partisanship, grouping them as either a Democrat or a Republican. But values, motivations, and policy-driven issues often shift people's political stance year to year, resulting in missed opportunities if ads are targeted solely based on political party affiliation. Still, one big challenge remains that I think will resonate well with you at home. How do we get the audience engaged enough to take action? Here at West Monroe, our clients ask us that question a lot, wondering if there's a simple and quick solution. Our answer always comes back to one thing: being digital. Having access to data on either your customers or employees helps companies glean insight on their behavior and even identify additional audience segments or targets to start engaging with. Hopefully this article inspires you and your company to sit down and have a conversation on the ways that you can utilize data to target existing and new audiences. Now, let's hear from our guest. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Robert Westcott, president and founder of Keybridge Research, an economic and public policy consulting firm based in Washington, D.C. Rob brings more than 35 years of professional experience in macroeconomic, financial, and public policy issues to our discussion today. His experience includes years as an official in the Research Department and European Department at the International Monetary Fund, and 4 years as an economic advisor to the president at the White House. His published research has covered a variety of topics over the years, including macroeconomics, global financial risks, fiscal policy, economic development, globalization, and inflation. With global markets still experiencing volatility and the future of the workforce continuing to change, I'm thrilled to welcome Rob to This is Digital and to chat about how digital transformation plays into each of these areas. Rob, thank you so much for joining today.
Happy to be here.
And Rob, I know I condensed, many years of your experience into a few sentences. Could you please tell us a little bit more about your background?
Yeah, no, actually, Rissa, you did a good job. I would just add that in the early part of my career, I was an academic as well, doing research and teaching university students. Actually, at one point in my career, about the 20-year mark, I realized that I'd spent almost exactly 1/3 as an academic, 1/3 in the private sector, and 1/3 in government service. And I loved every one of these career paths. So I'd just say in the academic world, we learned economic theory and how to form a hypothesis. You also learn how to explain things to people. That's an important skill. In the private sector, I learned about businesses, how they make decisions, how they assess risks. and what kinds of things they think about when they make $1 billion capital spending investment, for example. In the government sector, I learned, how to make policies that will help people live better lives. And I will just say, working at the White House 4 years, I think I met 50 heads of state or presidents. So there are a lot of things you get to do in the government sector that you don't get to do in the private sector. So anyway, that was my background. One thing I would just say, one of my favorite jobs was editing and writing the IMF's, International Monetary Fund's World Economic Outlook. And that was their review of the world economy, where it's going, what risks are, and so on. And when I think about today, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, surging oil prices and energy prices and global recession risks, I think my experience there, I was pretty lucky because it was like pretty much on point, good training for today.
Well, and I would suspect too, Rob, that the experience that you have with one third across these different segments really uniquely positions you for this conversation today, given most, I would suspect, have 100% versus your third, which I think is really interesting. So a question that we like to ask our guests, Rob, is what does digital mean to you?
To me, it means efficiency. It means using information, easily sharing information. I think it means opening doors, increasing living standards. It should mean increased opportunities for research and development. It should mean new ways of reducing business costs. I think it should be better ways of delivering credit to businesses that deserve it. Now, you got to figure out which businesses deserve it and who's going to pay back, but it should be helping to make credit systems work better. I know many people think about digital and they think about the consumer. They think about, using it for entertainment or identifying which groups you want to target for, say, advertising, that kind of thing. And that's all fine to me, but I really think about it mainly on the production side. What does it mean for science, technology, improve financial and economic productivity? That's what I think of.
And Rob, does digital present unique challenges?
Yeah, it does. Digital is still a little bit like the wild, wild west to me. I'm thinking about everything from like cryptocurrencies to data aggregators who collect 10,000 data series on each individual person and package that data.
What role would you say that government should be playing as it relates to digital?
If a bunch of people lose their life savings because they invested in cryptocurrency, that's not going to be a good thing for the technology. It's going to undermine confidence. If a lot of people realize, how exposed they are with their data being out there with data aggregators, if there are 10,000 data series, as is said, are available on each person, some people will say, oh, I live a clean life. I have no secrets. It's no problem. But there are a lot of issues. One could just be there's some incorrect data out there, and how do you correct it? So I think we do need government and we do need regulators to look at this and to make sure that the technology is useful and prevent abuses and make sure it helps to serve people.
And when you mentioned that digital is a bit of the Wild West, how do you adjust? I mean, when you think about policies that are created to protect people, but yet we may not understand where some of these technologies are taking us or the implications of them. How do you recommend that policy continue to adjust, or that we keep focused on how fluid the needs might be as we learn more about different technologies?
I do believe in experimentation, and I think we have to try new things. And so I'm a big fan of trying new tools and see what they can do. But we do have to have our arms around the whole story, and we have to say, what are the implications of this? Are people hurt? Again, we have to protect people, and we have to make sure that they are fully informed about the risks when they're using certain technology or when they're, say, entering a chat room on a computer. So there are things that we need to do to try to keep people safe. But mainly, you can't just shut everything down. You have to try, and you have to see what might work.
Rob, would you say that there's still a distinction between the digital economy and the brick and mortar economy, or at this point, is it now simply the economy?
It's getting more and more to just be the economy. So I would say, though, it's not a straight line. It's not a straight line. Take something like e-commerce. So under COVID, e-commerce jumped from 10 or 11% of retail sales to 16, 17% of retail sales. And we all understood that. We thought it was probably overshooting some, and the answer is it was overshooting some. We're back down to 14% of retail sales are e-commerce, and it's probably going to drift back down a little bit more. It's not going back to 10 or 11, but it is, it's going through an adjustment period. Some firms overinvested in e-commerce. Even Amazon is closing some transportation hubs and has said that they overinvested some too much in e-commerce. We have to be aware that these things don't work in straight lines. Take something like virtual doctor's office visits. Like those ramped up a lot under COVID. It was great that we had them, and we're not going back to like almost no virtual office visits like we had before COVID. But I think many people would say if I have a choice between seeing my doctor, I'd rather take that than just have a virtual visit. So I think there's going to be some back and forth. When I think about activities under like COVID, and we know people haven't gone back to movies for the most part yet. They're not flocking back to sports clubs or exercise classes. They're not exactly flocking back to offices at this point. Workers are not. I think one thing that is going to happen, we are seeing more and more interest in experiential retailing, and I think that's for real and is going to continue. So some people might call this hybrid retailing, but people have missed other people under COVID. I think people do like to shop. They do like to walk around and see things, and I think they are looking for social interaction. So I think we're seeing things like classes, painting instruction with wine tasting. These kinds of things are going to stay, I think. Also, you go into a 100 square meter fashion boutique and you consult with a trained salesperson looking for, say, a new jacket. I think this is going to be for real. The salesperson can tell you what they think you would look good in. You can then try it on in a virtual, you can try a jacket on. You can see what you would look like in different colors on a screen. And then you can order the color that you like. You go home without the garment, and then it's shipped to your house 3 days later. I think those kinds of things are going to be for real, and I think the world has changed, and those sorts of digital transformations are going to continue.
And Rob, you mentioned digital evolution or acceleration, if you will, of healthcare and of retail. Are there other industry segments for which you believe this is particularly relevant?
I think if you really start to go down the path, virtually anything that can be done with a meeting, a face-to-face meeting, a lot of this will be able to be handled with a professional, like take professional services. I think a lot of them can be delivered digitally. So whether it's meeting with lawyers, teams of lawyers, meeting with management consultants, meeting with accountants. I think a lot of these sorts of activities can be converted to digital. It's not going to be a straight line. If you've never met people before, you may not feel comfortable sharing a bunch of details with, say, your lawyer or whatever. So I think, again, we're probably going to see hybrid use of many of these services. So you have a relationship, the lawyers, the accountants, the professionals that you're interacting with, the management consultants, the strategy people, and you have a base of understanding with them. You trust each other. After a certain point, the meetings are arranged as makes sense, including a lot of digital meetings.
We're in planning season, Rob, and I'm curious. I know you have a lot of conversations with prominent CEOs and advise them on what you're seeing in the marketplace. As we head into 2023, what should be top of mind for business leaders?
We all know the Fed is raising interest rates and costs of capital are going up, and that's shaping the markets greatly. We are concerned about a slowdown of the world economy. We think that Europe is in recession already. I think Germany is in recession already, for example. I think the UK is in recession. If you're running a business and you export a lot, you're going to have to be aware that some of your export markets may be weakening. So that's one thing. I think the labor market has shifted a lot. The labor market has been a really fascinating story. And we've really gone from a situation where a labor market was extremely tight. Maybe we're starting to see some cracks emerging now in terms of maybe some softening in the demand for some categories of workers. We can talk about that more. But I think these are some of the issues that business leaders have to think about in 2022. Am I going to see softening economic conditions, higher costs of capital, and what am I right sized in terms of my labor force?
I'd love to hear more of your perspective on the labor market and what your predictions are for 2023. And I'm curious, as you think about labor, presumably that's employees, but then also contractors are a piece of the puzzle. And how might you advise companies that are thinking through what the right mix is for their business?
When COVID hit, we lost 20 million workers in 1 month. So in the single month of April 2020, we lost 20 million workers. And in some ways, we've been fighting our way back ever since. We've added a lot of jobs, and we've now reattained the pre-COVID level of employment we had. the unemployment rate has gotten back to the pre-COVID level, 3.5% unemployment rate. So in many ways, the labor market's healed, but we're still down about 1.5% of the workforce. And these are people who've disappeared. And so first of all, that raises the question, where did these people go? Who are they and where did they go? We believe about half of them became early retirees. These were people who were 61, 62, 63, 64. Under COVID, maybe they weren't happy with their work, but also the stock market was booming in like 2021. Many of them saw their 401k plan. They thought it was worth $500,000. Oh, suddenly it was worth $750,000. And they were like, oh, gee, this is a great time to retire. I don't think those people are coming back. The other big group that we've been able to identify are parents of young children who are in school age. And I think everyone on this podcast knows that just complete disruptions the last couple of years in terms of schools closing, daycare centers closing because of COVID outbreaks and so on. And that has driven a number of people out of the labor force as well. I think many of those people will come back to the labor force once everything seems to settle down. The end result, though, is that we've had a very tight labor market, without any question. In July, we had 2 job openings that businesses were looking to fill for every single unemployed worker. So 2 openings for every unemployed worker. And the end result is really the tightest labor market in U.S. history by far. Workers have felt empowered. Wage demands have been going up. Wages are up about 6.5% year on year, one of the biggest increases of wages we've seen. So I think we would basically say 2022 was the year of the worker. Okay, They felt empowered to demand higher wages. They felt empowered to demand remote work or other work concessions. So that's been the case. And I think 2023 is going to be a year of transition, and probably I call it the year of the big sort. And I think businesses are going to start looking at workforce and their configuration workers. I think many of them are going to say, it worked great. Remote work worked great for a certain percentage of our workers, depending on the nature of the work. But I think some other businesses may say it wasn't working as well as we thought. And we kind of went along with it because, the workforce was kind of demanding these changes. But for us, we want a certain percentage of workers for certain tasks to be back in the office. So I think we're going to see some of that in 2023. The other thing is, I think another big adjustment is workers themselves are reassessing some of their life choices. And I think a lot of workers who may be working remote, especially maybe some younger workers, may be saying, I'm not getting the mentoring I needed, I'm not getting the training I needed, or maybe they're saying, I'm not getting the promotions I was expecting, I'm not getting in the mix with the managers as much as I thought. So I think in 2023, we're going to see some shifts. I think overall, it's going to be a good thing. I think technology is going to have a really important role to play in 2023. So it won't be one size fits all, everyone works remote. I think it's going to be really sorting through what are the tasks of the business and can they be well done from remote work, on what basis, what communication, and what digital technology do you need? So I think there's going to be a big sort. I think, again, Rissa, this is good for IT consultants to help companies figure out a good strategy for their business.
So it sounds to me, Rob, from what you're saying, that we're not going to see an end of volatility in 2023, and perhaps we even will see more volatility in 2023. What steps should companies be taking to protect themselves or to insulate themselves from that continued volatility?
So I think some of this is going to be going back to basics. I think a lot of companies are going to, hunker down some. We're starting to see some reductions of hiring. We're not seeing companies doing layoffs at this point, but we are seeing companies announcing hiring freezes, for example. So they're going to reassess what their needs are. I think many companies are going to be looking really carefully. They know wage demands are up. I think there's going to be a push for automation in some sectors. So I think we're going to see investment in ordering kiosks at fast food restaurants, for example. I think that's going to be the standard a year from now. I think if you go to almost any fast food restaurant, you're going to be pushing buttons to order your food. So we're going to be seeing those kinds of investments being made. We're going to see probably some cutting back on some broad expansion plans, probably in 2023. I think if you have global uncertainty and the chance of a global recession, you're going to see businesses, deferring maybe some big multi-billion-dollar investment projects. Doesn't mean they won't do them, but they might just say, hey, the board of directors is going to defer for 6 months. We'll reassess in June of 2023 what we want to do. I think you're going to see a little bit of a slowdown of overall business activity in some of these areas.
Which to me, you're reminding me, Rob, a bit of a piece that we published recently that's talking about using essentialism to define your priorities in a downturn. How do you create greater focus during a downturn and focus on what really matters most for the business?
You get back to your core business. What is it we do for a living? What is our reputation? What is it that we deliver to our clients that our clients absolutely need? And you deliver that. Again, put yourself in your client's shoes. What are they going to need to succeed in a more stressed financial and business environment? Rather than trying to roll out 10 new products, you're going to pick the 2 or 3 that have the highest hurdle rate, can pass the highest hurdles, and you're going to put your effort into those. Probably you're going to have some ideas. You're going to say, that's still a pretty good idea, but we might do that in 2024.
Shifting gears just a little bit, Rob, you have a lot of experience really with globalization, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on, the global economy and what the implications are for U.S.-based businesses.
Yeah, I think that the globalization business model is under incredible stress right now. It has been under growing stress for the last 10 years or so. So some of this was China's rise as a manufacturing center. Hey, it was great for making low-cost goods and so on, but it did cause some job loss in manufacturing, both in Europe and in the United States, and so it started to create a political backlash. So that's kind of been percolating for 10 years or so. But 2 new developments really, I think, have changed the game. One was COVID. Some countries blocked exports of certain products, PPE equipment and chemicals that were used for pharmaceuticals. Some countries blocked them. I'm not thinking, just of China. I want to be clear. Italy had a company that was making vaccines, and they had a contract to sell the vaccine to Australia. But, under COVID, they were like, we could really use this vaccine here. And Italy was very hard hit, as you know, with COVID in the early days. And so I think that raised the whole specter that countries could say, we're going to put our self-interest first and, even over trade, even over like contracts for, exports and so on. But the real development, I believe, was the geopolitical tension that Mr. Putin kicked off when he invaded Ukraine on February 24th. The globalization model has always assumed that countries, if they were linked together through trade, through foreign direct investment, that they would, be good partners, be peaceful partners with their trading colleagues. And I think Mr. Putin's decision to invade Ukraine really has disrupted the apple cart on that front. We collected data. Russia last year exported $86 billion of energy to Western Europe. And Russia last year exported $156 billion of goods to Western Europe, including energy, but also chemicals and metals and other fertilizers and other goods. I think that has really shocked people. That's about 20% of Russian household income. So Mr. Putin effectively was saying, I'm willing to give up or to threaten, 1/5 of my people's household income in order to have this military objective to invade Ukraine. And I think that has really scared people because that really goes directly against this concept that we'll all be one big happy family if we trade and invest in each other. And so that's been a concern. And I think increasingly it's not just Russia and Ukraine, but it's really been affecting people's thinking about China. I mean, Mr. Xi says he wants to take over Taiwan, and I think that's raising concerns in the business sector. There's been a spiking of the number of U.S. S&P 500 companies that are mentioning Taiwan as a potential business risk in their 10K forms, for example. Got to keep a close eye on this. I think overall we're going to see more fracturing of global production systems and supply chains. I think you're going to see the one word we're hearing more and more is China plus one. And what that means is I'm not necessarily going to pull out of China. I have a factory in China. I'm making these goods. I'm not necessarily going to pull out or close the factory, but I'm not going to build, if I'm going to expand, I'm not going to build the next one next to it. I'm going to put the next factory in India or Vietnam or Mexico or someplace. And so I think these are some of the changes. They're just kind of the new reality. By the way, it's not even the lack of globalization. It may mean making goods in India, still shipping them by FedEx or ship or whatever back to the U.S. or from Vietnam back or Mexico back. But I do think we're going to see some shifting attitudes toward the global business model.
And any other implications that you're seeing, Rob, from a supply chain standpoint? I mean, it sounds like, you're seeing companies that are interested in hedging their risk by opening up, as you mentioned, China's plus one. Any other implications or any other trends that you're seeing as it relates to supply chain management?
Yeah, well, I think one thing is there's been a shift of focus on costs. So it could be that opening a second factory in Mexico or another place, maybe those goods will cost 5% more or 10% more. I think more companies are going to say, we need to diversify supply chains here. I'm willing to have higher costs of some of these items. And so, first of all, I think we're going to see some increase of costs overall with more diversification of supply chains. We're going to see that. I think we just need to be realistic here that the world is Russia's invasion of Ukraine just disrupted things. It's been unsettling. And one of the other things that's been unsettling is the speed at which social pressure came onto company executives who were doing business in Russia. So, you could see if some company in Russia was like supplying metals to the defense industry, why there would be a lot of pressure on that company to not supply the metal that was making weapons, say, in Russia. But there was a lot of pressure on Western companies that were selling handsets of telephones in Russia or selling hamburgers in Russia and other things that were not really militarily oriented. And I think that has also been a little bit of a wake-up call to some businesses that were like, our shareholders, our stakeholders are nervous and they're putting pressure on us to either pull out of certain markets or sell subsidiaries or whatever. I think that's been a little bit of a surprise as well.
Rob, we talked a lot about nervousness of investors, of uncertainty in the markets. Are there any bright spots that you're seeing? Anything that you're excited about in 2023?
Rissa, I'm an optimist on the U.S. economy and on productivity and on future growth. So even if we have a recession, to me, that sows the seeds of entrepreneurs picking up the pieces and investing anew. So even if we do have a recession and if the first half, say, of 2023 isn't great, I think the economy gets back on its feet in 2024 and, we're inventing new things. And I think digital technology is going to play a key role. Think about like health and medicine, first of all. COVID really, it was devastating, but it really opened eyes to new technology like mRNA technology, new vaccine development techniques. I think we're going to be seeing that technology unlocking all kinds of new vaccination capabilities that can improve health. First of all, I'll just say that was been a big development. I think big data is really going to be coming into its own. Right now, we collect every cancer tumor in America and we do DNA testing on it. We store it in a lab in Texas. And increasingly, we're figuring out which drugs affect which cancers and which ones have good outcomes. So I actually believe we're probably looking at a cure for cancer in the next 3, 5, 7 years. I think it'll be a 22 blank something when we feel like we've really got a cure for cancer. And I think the solution is going to come as much through big data as anything. So really exciting. This green energy is getting hundreds of billions of dollars of investment and globally trillions of dollars of investment. And I think this is unstoppable. And if anything, the developments in Europe and the damage that's being caused by being cut off from Russian gas is really going to give a real push more green investment in energy in Europe. So windmills, solar. It's not just windmills and solar, though. It's really energy systems, backup storage systems, switching capabilities, and that's going to be in the U.S. and in Europe. EVs are now unstoppable. Electric vehicles are now unstoppable. And we're going to be, I believe, exceeding most people's estimates of the implementation of EVs. I personally am on my 4th EV. So, I'm not bragging, but I'm just saying, the technology works. And I think that even by like 2026, we're going to be talking about like 20% of vehicles sold are going to be EVs. And by 2030, it's going to be 40 to 50%. So that technology is coming on as well. So lots of exciting developments in healthcare, in energy. So yeah, I'm excited. And I think we're going to see lots of new things coming in the next 2 or 3 years.
So you mentioned bright spots being healthcare, energy, and utilities. Any other sectors that you're excited about for 2023?
Yeah, and I just want to make one point on back to the energy side. It's not just windmills or solar panels. I want to be clear. It is systems. It is like go to Texas, to the fields of Texas where you've got windmills. And so you have a wind generation facility. You got to have sensors and meters that are testing the wind 20 miles to the west, 20 miles to the north, south, east, and so on. And the sensors are going to be every 2 miles, and software is going to be and sensors are going to be picking up the changes in the wind speed. And they're going to be coming to a central dispatch office for the utility, and they're going to say, wind has dropped from 17 miles an hour to 13 miles an hour from the west. We think it's going to start to reduce power output by 19% starting in 25 minutes. It's going to be get the gas backup generator spinning, the standby generator spinning. It's going to have to kick on and take this 19% load or whatever. Or it's going to be, getting ready to start sucking power out of the batteries they've been charging the last 3 days over there as part of the facility. So it's systems, not just hardware. And I want to be clear about that. And I think that's really where the exciting stories are, is the integration of energy systems.
Well, and certainly we're seeing grid modernization efforts. What are some of the other aspects of the systems coming together do you find exciting?
We need to find new forms of energy to fuel our most heavy demand transportation needs like aircraft, and also our most heavy energy demands like steel making or aluminum making, aluminum smelters, these kinds of things. And so we're increasingly going to be seeing the growth of green hydrogen, of blue hydrogen. We're going to be seeing increasing use of like carbon capture. We are now on the cusp of seeing electric commuter airplanes that are going to be flying within the next couple of years as test cases. And then over time, I think we're going to see battery-operated larger planes. So it's a whole revolution of energy that's coming over the next 20 years. And we're going to start to see big chunks of it coming into focus in the 2020s.
Getting back to your expertise in energy policy, you've done a ton of work in this space. How has that work in energy policy influenced some of the things that you're seeing in the energy industry now?
We did a lot of modeling work here at Keybridge, our firm, looking at the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and we've been looking at that. We've been looking at the economic effects of electrifying the vehicle fleet. So we've been doing a lot of economic modeling work in this area, and the good news is that many of these new technologies will create jobs. They require new investments. That's going to be a big area of focus. These new, Ford has announced $11 billion of new investments in a battery plant and an EV assembly plant in west of western Tennessee near Memphis. General Motors has been announcing on the order of $25 billion of new investment in new plants and battery production in Michigan. So we've got big investments coming. One other area that is a little bit playing off the globalization issue is companies and countries are thinking more about supply chains. We are looking at semiconductor production. Semiconductors are really the hot concern here in Washington today. And as you know, we passed a $52 billion CHIPS Act, and so Intel is breaking ground on 2 new semiconductor production plants in the state of Ohio. These are jobs in the short run of constructing firms, but over time they're going to be thousands of jobs, of American jobs, make ingredients we need and the components we need for the future.
As an economist, Rob, you do a lot of predicting, and I'm curious, if you were to boil down 2023, what's your prediction in one word for what 2023 will hold?
It's going to be stressful. I'm not saying we're definitely going to have a recession, but I think we're going to have at least a growth pause. Rather than like negative GDP and lots of layoffs, maybe we just have a pretty soft economy that grows like, say, 0.7% growth for a year. You could have that, 1% growth. It wouldn't feel great. It wouldn't feel horrible. But I think it would create stress. And I think it would create many of these challenges for CEOs and for business managers that we talked about earlier. So it means keeping a close eye on your labor force, probably trimming your sales some in terms of your investment plans, focusing on the basics of your business. This is probably not a time that people are going to be wildly expanding their business in 2023.
With elections upon us, what do you see happening as a result?
Yeah, the betting at this moment in time is that the House of Representatives may flip to Republican control. The Senate may stay in Democratic control, although the races for both of the houses are going to be pretty tight. It'll be a big question whether Republicans take the House, but not the Senate, or the House and the Senate. If they take the House and the Senate, they basically can pass laws and they can agree to them, and then they can send them to President Biden's desk. He may choose to veto them, but he could be put into a position of vetoing some awkward policies. If the Democrats keep the Senate, the House can still take initiatives, like they can pass a bill to, say, cut taxes or on business or whatever, but the Senate may not go along with it, in which case it kind of dies pretty quickly, and Biden doesn't even have to issue a veto. I think our biggest concern right now, if the House flips, at least, Kevin McCarthy has said just recently that they will use the debt ceiling debate as a way to try to pressure the administration to change certain economic policies. And we don't know exactly when the debt ceiling will be hit, but our best guess is probably third quarter of 2023, so about a year from now. And this is kind of what we had in 2011, if folks remember, where it was kind of like the debt ceiling, if it doesn't get passed by, midnight on Thursday, the government's going to shut down, and it can't send out Social Security checks on Saturday and that kind of thing. And so that's a concern that we're worried about here in Washington, is if it's dysfunction and it's just kind of like we're making a big fight. Some of that's just a big fight, and it all gets blown over. It sorts itself out. But if you're dealing with a world that could be in recession, and you're worried about a world where there's a lot of nervousness, having the U.S. government potentially defaulting on its debts or reaching an impasse, that concerns us. One other thing I would just say, we know that the Republicans have said they would like to make the Trump tax cuts of 2017 permanent. Several of the tax cuts that were passed in 2017 had sunset provisions. They did not go on forever. And the betting at the time was, let's try to keep the costs manageable in this time window, and we'll assume that our party will be controlling the Congress in 5 years, and that we can get them to extend or 6 years. And so those are some of the agenda items. So to extend tax cuts for wealthier families, and also to probably cut Social Security payments, or to at least trim the CPI inflation formulas, like for Social Security. Those are the kinds of things that Kevin McCarthy has said that Republicans would have as a priority if they win the House of Representatives.
Rob, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I do have a question for you. If people would like to stay in touch with you and your thought leadership, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, at Keybridge Research in Washington, rwestcott@keybridgedc.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your insights, and a pleasure as always.
Thanks for listening to This is Digital. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow or subscribe on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget to leave us a review. For more information on This is Digital, visit westmonroe.com/thisisdigital.